I'm Renee Williams.
And I'm Billy Thomas.
And welcome to another edition of From the Woods Today. You know, Billy, we have a very interesting show today.
We do. We've got a reoccurring guest, Anna Weicker. She is the park naturalist at Raven Run Nature Sanctuary here in Fayette County. And Anna's been on the show a number of times, but she's got something really cool today. She's going to be talking about birds and how to ID them by ear and how to sound. So, Anna, we're looking forward to your segment here in a few minutes. And then we have Kai Davis. Kai, again, is a graduate student here in our Department of Forestry and Natural Resources. And Kai's got some wildlife sounds for us. Kai's always a treat to have on the show. And then we got our resident forest health expert, Dr. Ellen Crocker, going to be talking about something you've probably seen along the roadsides, or you will be soon. And she's going to let us know what's going on with some of those trees that we see along the roads and maybe out in your woods as well. So glad to have you all with us. If you're on Zoom, please use the chat box and we will interact with you there. And if you're in Facebook Live, you can use the comment section. We can get with you there. But glad to be with you today, Renee, and glad to get started with this good show.
Definitely. So, Anna, how do you identify birds by ear?
Well, I'm ready to get into it and talk about it if you all are ready.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite subjects, so I appreciate you all having me on and talking about it this morning.
Well, we love having you, Anna. You've got so much information and knowledge, and you're just such a great presenter and an all-around good person. So we're glad you're here.
And I'm interested in finding that out because I never can figure out what bird it is.
I believe in you. I truly think that
you can.
Well, I don't want to go so far as to say everyone will learn birds by ear after today, but I do think it's something that we already know more than we think that we know. Like we hear Canada geese and we hear blue jays and we hear American crows, and there's probably so many birds that most people already know. And they don't even know that they know them, if that makes sense,
Yeah, good point.
Yeah. So
looking forward.
I think most folks are further into it than what they actually realize that they are. But we'll go ahead and get into the details.
Sounds good.
Thanks.
Yeah, so I am going to be talking about a little bit about birding by ear and some tips and tricks to get you started with your birding by ear career, so to speak. This is just it's a cool way to increase your awareness of, the natural world. It's a cool way to just kind of be more tuned into what's happening as you're, trail running or gardening or sitting on your porch or something like that. It's just sort of an extra step of integrating yourself, sort of into the natural world and experiencing it in a different way. It's also a good party trick, of course. There's endless opportunities to impress people with your birding by ear knowledge, and I'm sure many people appreciate it when I personally loudly yell the name of birds that I hear. So that's generally something that other folks like and are impressed by, I think, if I understand correctly. And it feels like a secret language. Like it's cool to have that knowledge sort of stored in your brain and ready to pop up at a moment's notice. The other thing I think that's really cool about birding by ear is it's such a great way for folks who might be blind or visually impaired to get into bird watching. It sort of opens up a whole new avenue of bird identification and ways to grow your skills. So I think it's a really pretty cool little endeavor, little hobby to get into. So a couple things to keep in mind. So really quick about bird vocalization. Birds have two main types of vocalizations. They have songs and calls. Songs are usually complex and longer. They're usually related to defending a territory or attracting a mate. They're usually sung by male birds, although not always. Whereas calls are shorter. They're not as complex. They're usually just one or two notes. And they're used for like communication between birds in a flock or birds that are, interacting with each other in some way. It's sort of the bird equivalent of like, hey, excuse me, or, you mind if I slip behind you? Hey, there's a predator behind us. Like it's used for that type of communication. So for the purposes of learning bird vocalizations, it's easier to focus on songs at first because they are more, they're more complex. There's more to work with. It's less frustrating than just trying to identify this little like one note call that doesn't really have a lot about it that stands out. So we'll focus on bird songs for today rather than calls. Although you can certainly go play on hard mode if you would like eventually and start working on learning your bird calls as well. So a few tools to kind of have in your toolbox to get you started. There's lots of different ways to do this, but in the interest of kind of narrowing it down to what I think is the most helpful, mnemonic devices is a big one with especially beginning birding by ear folks, folks who are just kind of getting into birds in general. And this is pretty much, at least insofar as what we're talking about right now, those memorable phrases, sentences, words that sound like a bird song. So it sounds like the bird is saying blank, like for the Eastern towhee, it's drink your tea. And I'll play it here in a second. And this is just something that kind of helps you remember like, oh, that's the drink your tea bird. That's the oh, sweet Canada, Canada bird. And that can, kind of be a mental sort of trigger for you to have that bird's name kind of pop up in your mind. And a lot of the times these are standardized sort of in the birding vernacular, as it were. And they may even be standard across field guides. So you'll see these written descriptions commonly in field guides. So for example, our little Eastern towhee, this beautiful, beautiful bird right here. He's got that 3-note pattern of a song that sounds like he's saying, drink your tea. Lifting out, he's getting all the free advertising. And then the white-throated sparrow is oh, sweet Canada, Canada, although some folks, especially in the US, will go with old Sam Peabody, but kind of same, similar phrase, helps you remember, sort of the cadence of that bird. So mnemonic devices in the form of sentences or phrases that kind of trigger something in your brain that's going to help you remember the species. Another thing that's helpful is comparisons to familiar sounds. So this could be any of a number of things. And again, just like the phrases, sentences, or words, a lot of these are like standardized across field guides and sort of the birding vernacular. Like for example, with this field sparrow, a lot of the times you'll see in field guides or descriptions, written descriptions, that it sounds like a ping pong ball bouncing on a table, which is, I would say maybe, that's very loose description of what it sounds like, but it kind of helps you remember the rhythm of the song. If you listen to it, the way that it speeds up is going to remind you of a ball, bouncing on a table and progressively, shorter and shorter and shorter distances from the table. So another one that, you'll pretty much always see the same description for. This is our little Eastern screech owl buddy there with the great big eyes. And they, a lot of the times, are described as sounding like a tiny horse, which as soon as you hear it, you're like, oh, that's a bird that sounds like a tiny horse. So you're not going to forget that. It's something that it's easy to, if you step out on your back deck, you hear a weird bird, you're like, well, that sounds like a bird at night. I wonder if it's an owl. You're flipping through your field guide, you see a description of an owl that sounds like a tiny horse. It's going to be pretty easy for you to narrow that down and go online and, double check with a recording or something like that. So those two sort of mnemonic devices, the phrases and sentences, and then comparing to other sounds, in and of themselves, you're not going to be able to flip through a field guide, read every description of every song, and get it, identified from there. But they can be great ways of just keeping them in your memory, keeping them in your brain, and kind of helping you associate that phrase or description, whatever it might be, with a specific species of bird. So you can invent your own too. If there's something that really sticks out to you when you hear a bird, then that might be the thing that sticks in your head. Like there's a bird called a white-eyed vireo, and I just think they sound like a really dramatic sneeze, like just somebody who wants everyone in the world to know that they're sneezing. And they always stick in my head like that. And, you know, it might not work for anyone else, but I've thought of them like that for years and I remember it. So, you know, if something sticks in your head, maybe you can invent your own mnemonic device that'll work for you. And then, of course, another helpful tool is other humans that are already into birds. Attending guided bird walks are just a really great way to be out there with folks who may already know some of what they're listening for. They might be able to give you some tips and tricks to learn birds that are local to your area, or, you know, some tips and tricks that maybe I haven't thought of or you haven't thought of that might be helpful to you. And it's great to have somebody there who can sort of double check your work, so to speak, and, you know, see if you're on the right track with some of your birding by ear identifications. There's quite a few different ways to find guided bird walks. It sort of depends on where you're at in the state. You know, calling local parks. A lot of the times local parks will host bird walks. I know here at LFUCG Natural Areas, we certainly host bird walks throughout the year. Your local Audubon group could be a great resource. There's usually folks out there that are more than happy to share their knowledge and take you out birding with them. This is a really cool, relatively recent, helpful tool for birding by ear identification that I do want to mention because it, I think, kind of really changes the game as far as learning these bird songs. It makes it a lot easier than learning them from a description in a field guide, like a printed description in a field guide. And I will sort of, I guess, you know, share this with a caveat, but I will preface by saying it is a really helpful tool. And this is Merlin Bird ID, which is a free app. If you don't have it, pick up your phone, type it into the App Store, download it right now. I'm not sponsored, but this is an incredible resource that you can get for free. The Cornell Lab of Ornithology has put this all together. They've done an amazing job. It is a wonderful tool for everyone from, you know, sort of casual observers, or, you know, maybe even folks who are into birds just because they're educators, because they're gardeners, all the way to birding experts and, you know, professionals in the field. It's an amazing resource. You can identify birds doing multiple things with it. But one of the cool new features that they've just sort of introduced recently is the sound ID feature. So when you download the app, you're going to have this main page here, and you're going to, it's, you know, going to open up like this, and you can look down to where I've circled there where it says sound ID, and it'll pop up for you with a little, you know, microphone that you can record on. And of course, you have to make sure that the app has access to your microphone before you can get this to work, which is, you know, not too difficult. And it gives you the instructions there, you know, get as close to the bird as you can without disturbing it. Press record when you think you can get a good, you know, snapshot of the bird's vocalization. And it'll, you know, take this recording for you. And I would certainly give it more than a couple seconds. You can see I did a recording here that was 7 seconds long of a bird that I heard on the 28th of July. You can see it says listening for birds there. It says right here, Merlin could not determine your location. That's because I was in very bad service. But if you're in good service, it'll help it narrow it down based on location, what you might be hearing. And then, you know, you'll just hit the stop button and it'll analyze it, and it will come up with some possibilities for what you might have heard. And it is remarkably, I would say remarkably accurate already, even though it's a relatively new feature. I would not rely on it like 100% just because I wouldn't, you know, rely on those things 100%, but it's remarkably accurate. It's a great way to get, you know, sort of a handle on your local birds. It's a great way to check your work, so to speak. It's a great way to identify a bird that you're just really, really stuck on. You can't figure it out. You can't get a visual of it, that kind of thing. So this is a really, really handy app for that kind of thing. And if you look, you can also go down to the bottom here under where it says sound ID and it says explore birds. And that's, you could click on that. You could go in there and type, say you already think you heard that eastern screech owl because you were standing on your back deck in the dark and you heard a tiny horse. You can click explore birds, type in eastern screech owl, play the vocalization, and just double check yourself that way as well. So a great app for a variety of reasons. Definitely recommend it. My caveat, I guess, with this is that any technology that makes it super easy to identify a bird, and I'm including like other people who can point and be like, that's a cardinal, that's a bluebird, that's a, you know, turkey vulture. I don't know that that information is retained as easily or retained as well in your brain as information that you sort of had to work for, so to speak. But that can come in handy. Again, I'm definitely not here to say that those things should not be used. I recommend them, in fact. But I would just keep in mind that if you just hear a bird sound, you identify it on Merlin and you go about your way, that information is probably, you know, less likely to stick in your head, I would say, than if you've kind of gone through a process like this one. And again, we love Merlin. We love using a field guide. We love using, you know, a friend to help us identify. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But just keep in mind what works best for you with your learning process. The way that works best for me, and again, this may not work best for everybody, but, you know, this is kind of my advice for what it's worth, is that if you first are, you know, you're out in the field, you're out in your backyard, whatever it might be, and you hear a bird that you don't recognize, take a minute and just listen to characteristics of the song. You know, just listen to the speed, listen to the tone, listen to the notes, listen to, you know, if it has any rhythm, if there's any phrase that it sounds like, if it can be compared to another sound that you know of. And, you know, just spend a little bit of time sort of absorbing it into your ears, and then locate and identify the bird visually if it is a possibility for you. So, you know, maybe you could listen to the cardinal in a tree for a while and then kind of poke around until you get a glimpse of it. And that's, you know, sort of the activity of putting in that little bit of extra mental effort, I think helps cement the bird's visual or name with the sound that you're hearing. And I think that, you know, it's always good, especially once you visually located it, if possible, to just keep observing it, listening to it, listening for variations in the song, maybe even listening for calls, and, you know, just kind of spending a little bit of time really making sure that that soaks into your brain. And then don't be mad if you hear that bird again tomorrow and you don't remember it. It takes a few tries, you know, it takes a few times. It takes repetition. It's like learning a new language. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with, like, once you've started getting familiar with a song, you think you know what it is, don't feel bad to bring up Merlin on your phone and double check yourself and see if you got it right. There's nothing wrong with quizzing yourself. It can definitely help you remember. One thing that I found helpful is that if you have a child or a grandchild or a niece or a nephew that is technologically savvy, you know, you can hand over the Merlin Bird app to them and have them start quizzing you on bird sounds on there. I would give them maybe a list of birds to choose from, so they're not quizzing you on birds that like live in, you know, Ontario or something like that and don't live in Kentucky. But that would be one option for quizzing yourself. There's also a great app that is not free, but I do think it's worth it, called Larkfire. And I can put that in the chat here when I'm done. But that one is a great one to quiz yourself with as well. A couple things to end on, things to keep in mind. Start with familiar birds. Don't overload yourself. You know, when you learn a new language, you just start with a few words. You don't start with, like, you know, an entire novel written in that language. So you just be patient with yourself. Remember that it's all about having fun. It's all about building your skill set. It's all about, honestly, impressing everybody around you, I would say. But just, you know, remember, take it one bird at a time, one species at a time, and have a great time with it. And go forth and hear birds and identify them. Having said all that, does anybody have any bird song identification related questions?
Thank you. That's great. I really appreciated that because and to be honest, you're right. I did know some that I didn't realize I knew. So
Yeah.
yes, definitely. So if there are any questions, folks, put them in the chat pod. But we greatly appreciate you doing this and being here with us.
For sure, for sure. Well, I will be hanging around. So if anybody has any questions, you know, I will be here. And if it's all right, I'll go ahead and drop in the chat the name of a couple apps that I would recommend. Is that okay?
Yeah, that'd be great. Well, thank you, Anna. We greatly appreciate it and loved your presentation.
Yeah, good stuff.
It was really
For sure. Thank you.
So, you know, speaking of bird sounds, we next have Hi Davis coming on, and I don't know what color he has chosen today, but Hi, you can bring your camera up if you'd like. I know you pick a bird color or a theme every time. So I'm curious as to what that is today. Oh, there you are.
But yeah, hello, nice to be here.
Yeah. So you are what's the bird for this week? Is it, I know you've done blue, you've done red. Do we have a color this time?
Yeah, so I'm doing gray today. So today
Okay.
will be a gray day in all the best ways.
Right.
So yeah, we have two birds for you. One will be a local bird that you'll find here in Lexington in Kentucky. The other one will be a migratory bird that you'll also find here, but in other places as well. So yeah, I guess we can go ahead and get started. I very much appreciated the last segment, and I was relating to a lot of it. So I thought that was pretty cool. And it is very much like learning a new language, and I like pride myself in that, and I think it's pretty cool and fun. And I've been known to nerd out, just walk in with friends, and I'm like, oh, that's that. Oh, that's that. And then they're just like, why? Yeah. So people just don't understand, but I'm hopeful that some people will end up like that too. It's a pretty fun little party trick, like they said. So
No doubt.
yeah. All right, let's go ahead. All right, so hello again. My name is Kai, and welcome to Wildlife Sounds today. And it's the bird edition. Like I said, we're doing gray, so I like to have a color theme for every day to help me choose birds because there's so many to choose from, and there's so many that I like. But yeah, today's gray. So let's go ahead and dive in. I'll show the habitat where you'll find this bird, and I'll play the recording of the call. So feel free to post what you think it might be, or you can just wait for me to reveal it. So let's do this. Okay, so for this one, so this is typically the habitat you'll find it in within a city. So this could be like an urban park or arboretum. And then you'll hear that Peter, Peter, Peter call. So that mnemonic that we heard about before. So Peter, Peter, Peter. So I'll play it again so you can hear that. All right, so I will do the grand reveal now. It is a tufted titmouse. So yeah, again, if you hear that Peter, Peter, Peter within the city, if you're just walking around, this is what you're gonna hear. This tiny little bird, gray bird, has white and then a little like brown orange on the side. So one of my favorite birds because they're so like little and cute, and they're everywhere around here for the most part. So you go to any park and you'll primarily hear this little Peter, Peter call. So yeah, let's learn some more about the tufted titmouse. So like I said, first of all, the song, so that's what we're listening for here is the song, not necessarily the call, just like we learned before. And that's primarily what I like to focus on in these as well. However, with the blue jay that I talked about before, that was more of a call. But for these, with the songbirds, we're primarily going to learn about the songs. So the Peter, 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 that's constantly going to be repeated over and over again. It's whistled series about 4 to 8 times, 4 to 8 notes. So that's what you're going to be hearing. So diving into the behavior and life history, So the tufted titmouse, or you can just call it a titmouse. That's what I like to call it. They flit around from branch to branch in the forest canopy looking for food. They're pretty acrobatic when they're foraging. They can hang upside down or sideways or even float for a little bit while they're looking for insects, looking on the other undersides of branches and leaf clusters and stuff like that. They can also be found hopping around on the ground looking for seeds and insects as well. So they can be pretty easy to find depending on where you're at. And when they find large seeds, they actually will hold them in their feet, and then they'll hammer at them to get them open. And then from there, they've been known to even store them in like wood crevices and bark crevices to get through like winter and things like that. So they're very vocal birds too. So like I said, you'll hear that Peter, Peter, Peter pretty often and pretty recognizably. And they respond and they're very curious to like other sounds of agitation from other birds, and they'll join in on a mob of a predator. So they're definitely down for a fight if as long as there's others also fighting away predators. So I think that's pretty interesting too for their behavior. They're fun little birds, like I said. So in terms of their diet, they eat mainly insects, like I said, especially in the summer. One thing that I really love about them is that they eat stink bugs as well. And stink bug is an invasive species, so they're really hard to get rid of. And in my previous apartment, I had them all the time, and I'm like, I need something that eats these. So the titmice will actually eat stink bugs, so I appreciate that. So they eat other insects and bugs as well. Um, and then these insects can make up to 2/3 of their diet annually, but they also eat seeds and nuts and berries and acorns and things like that. And then experiments had even shown that they will choose the larger nuts, like primarily all the time. So that's really interesting too. All right, so in terms of their habitat, you can see it here. So this is their year-round habitat. So, Kentucky is right in the midst of it. So that's where you're going to find them year-round all the time. So they live in deciduous woods, mixed evergreen deciduous woods. They like dense canopy and many tree species to be represented. They're common in orchards and parks in suburban areas if the trees are large enough. They're generally found in low elevations, though. You don't really find them above like 2,000 feet in elevation. All right, so in terms of conservation and threats, so like I said, they're really common, especially in these areas, and the population has actually increased from 1966 to 2019. Estimated population about 12 million. So it's a species of low conservation concern, which is good. And their range has been expanding northward over the last half century for various reasons. One can be global climate change as well. They're just moving a little bit more north. Then also farmlands reverting to forests and the growing popularity of backyard bird feeders too, as they're moving more northward. So then lastly, we can dive into a little fun facts for it. Titmice, they like to nest in tree holes, and they can't actually excavate their own like tree holes. So they'll use these natural hole cavities that are left by like woodpeckers and stuff. And they very much depend on dead wood as well for their homes. So that's one reason why it's important to allow dead wood to remain in forest for these, but also just regular forest ecosystem purposes. But this is one animal, one organism that can benefit from downed and dead wood. So also, they like to line the inner cup of their nest with hair. So they can even pluck the hair from actual living animals. And there's like a list of hair types that come from raccoons, opossums, mice, woodchucks, squirrels, rabbits, livestock, pets, and even humans. So watch your head. There might be some titmice coming to steal your hair. So on to the next one. So this is primarily going to be the habitat that you'll find it. They're pretty well found in urban settings as well. So yeah, let's go ahead and listen for the first time. Oops. Well, I revealed it, but I will have you go ahead and listen to it. So, oh, I see there's a chat as well. Oh no, that's not good. Yeah. Watch out for your dogs too, because they'll chase them apparently and try to get their hair. But yeah, so this mnemonic for the Eastern Phoebe, so this worked out pretty well. It's pretty easy to hear and recognize, and I feel like I would have given it away. So the mnemonic for this one is Phoebe, Phoebe. So it kind of announces its name in what it's saying. So that's easy to remember. And I guess it knew what I was gonna do anyway, because I would have revealed the name. So let's listen to it again. Okay, there we go. All right, so yeah, hopefully you heard that little Phoebe, Phoebe, and then sometimes they'll have that little flitter too, that Phoebe. So yeah, that's gonna be what you'll hear for Eastern Phoebe. So that's also a pretty recognizable one that you'll hear as well. Every now and then that one will stand out when I'm out doing field work and I'm like, oh, there's a Phoebe, that's pretty cool. So those two are some pretty easy ones to recognize if they tend to stand out in all the bird calls that are going, all the bird songs that are going. So let's learn some more about them. So they also make like a sharp peep call as well, and in addition to their familiar Phoebe song. So in terms of their behavior and life history, so they generally like to perch low in trees or on fence lines, so they can be pretty easy to spot and find, relatively speaking. They stay alert as they prepare to go after flying insects. And then when they spot a flying insect, they'll abruptly like go after them with quick wing beats and chase down their prey in a quick trip as they return right back to the perch or a similar area. Um, and very often do they hover and pick insects or seeds from foliage. They typically will perch and just watch and wait and then go after them, which I haven't seen in real life, but I would imagine that would be pretty cool. I haven't been birding in a while, but I think that would be one thing that I would love to watch and see. So when perched, these phoebes like to wag their tails up and down frequently too. So that's kind of a cool thing to see. They rarely occur in groups. They're pretty solitary, even with mated pairs. They're not around each other super often, super frequently. They spend little time together. And the males will sing that two-part raspy song throughout spring and aggressively defend their territory. Um, in the females, primarily, both sexes, but primarily females will defend against predators like snakes and jays and crows and things like that. So they are among the earliest of migrants, bringing hope that spring is here. So that's kind of cool. Once you start hearing them, you can know that spring's on its way. And then they're also one of the later migrants to leave the area too. And I'll talk about when they come here and when they leave a little bit later. In terms of their diet, like I said, they like flying insects, and that makes up primarily the majority of their diet. And one thing that I like about them in particular is that they eat ticks, and I hate ticks. I have not had one latch on me, knock on wood, and I hope that I can keep it that way. And the Phoebe, I appreciate them for eating ticks. So two birds that I appreciate for what they eat. And then they also eat small fruits and berries, especially in the cooler months, and that's a large part of their winter diet. So diving into their habitat, they tend to favor more open woods such as yards and parks and woodlands, farms, stream sides, woodland edges, which is interesting for a migratory bird. You typically don't see that for migratory birds, but they typically like the more open areas. They breed around areas with ideal nesting sites, which can include wooded areas, and then also human-built structures like the eaves of buildings and overhanging decks and bridges and culverts. So that's kind of interesting that they started to utilize this urban setting. So we can see that in their nesting behavior. And before these sites were common, they nested in bare rock outcrops, and they still do occasionally, depending on where they are. All right, in terms of their migration, you can see it up here is going to be their fall spring to fall migration. And then this is their breeding ground in the purple, and then this is non-breeding wintering area down below. Like I said, they favor open woods. They're hardy birds too, so they winter farther north than most other flycatchers. So typically, this wintering range will be much lower and down into even South America, but they go as low as the southern U.S. into Mexico, which is still pretty northward, relatively speaking. So that's pretty interesting. And like I said, they're the earliest returning migrants in the spring, and sometimes as early as March. So they can be like one of the first that you might hear in the springtime. So they're short to medium distance migrants. They migrate south in September to November range. So this was a perfect bird to choose for August, because by this time, most birds either have left or on their way out, but this one still lingers around September to November. So get out there and listen for the phoebe if you can. That's another migratory bird that you can listen to for a little bit and practice for these last few months before March, and then you'll be an expert by then. So let's see, going to conservation and threats. So the use of buildings and bridges for the nest sites has allowed the phoebe to tolerate the landscape changes made by humans and expand its range. So that's kind of interesting. A lot of bird species are being negatively affected by human interaction and urbanization and things like that, but this bird has learned to utilize those for its benefit. However, it still uses the natural nest sites if it can and if they're available. So the populations have increased slightly from 1966 to 2019, and estimated population is about 35 million. So again, another species of low conservation concern, which is good. More ticks being eaten, which I appreciate. And then historically, phoebes increased as people spread across the landscape and built structures that these birds could use. So again, this is a good example of how urbanization can benefit wildlife species, but that's not the case for all wildlife species, unfortunately. And then lastly, diving into some fun facts. One fun fact, in 1804, the eastern phoebe became the first banded bird in North America, which is pretty wild to imagine the first bird to be banded. So John James Audubon attached the thread to eastern phoebe and watched its return in successive years. So just a little fun fact for you. But that is everything for today for Wildlife Sounds. So thank you for joining in, listening, and learning. And if you all have any questions, feel free to post them.
Yeah, I love listening to that. It's always really neat.
A great gray day.
Yeah, a great day. I like it.
And I wanted to say titmouse on that first one, but I was a little nervous, like I was incorrect. I'm like,
Yeah.
But
Yeah. See, that's a perfect example of busting out the Merlin app, because I'm the same way. I'm like, I think that's that. Let me just make sure. And then you can confirm and be like, yeah, I knew that. I didn't need it. So
Oh, good stuff. I enjoy those,
Yeah.
really.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for being on it.
Yeah.
We look forward to hopefully you coming on in the later months.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The
looking
color
forward
day. Do you have it picked out yet?
I don't know. I was choosing between yellow and gray for this one, so maybe yellow, and we'll see. I have to find some migratories for September, and we'll
Okay.
go from there.
Excellent.
Sounds
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Bye.
Oh, good stuff.
Good. Very good.
Yeah.
All
Speaking of stuff that you see on the roadside, and maybe
Ellen, what's bugging my tree?
Well, we've just heard all about these amazing birds. So naturally, we have to talk about insects and diseases and all the things that are bugging your tree now, right?
Exactly.
That's part
So-
of it, though.
Yeah, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about something that you might have noticed in your trees. I've received several calls about this lately. Why are my trees turning brown? Why are all the trees dying on the side of the road? And this is one of the cases where, I can't tell you what's going on with your tree. Maybe it's dying, but maybe it's this other thing that can look really bad. Probably your trees are going to be fine.
All right, let's get her going.
Sudden browning of your tree's canopy is typically a major cause for concern. But if it's the middle of summer and you're seeing this on black locust, you might be seeing damage caused by the locust leaf miner. This is a native issue, and while it can look really bad, typically not a major health concern for your trees. Today we're going to talk a little bit about locust leaf miner, what it is, and what it means for your trees. Starting about in the middle of July, black locust trees start to look really bad in our area. Their canopies look scorched with leaves on them that are brown, and those kinds of symptoms, sudden tree death with the leaves still attached, are common in many vascular pathogens that can be major health issues for your trees. But look a little bit more closely at those leaves. If what you're seeing isn't leaves that have shriveled up and died of no apparent reason on the tree, but instead leaves that are covered with insects and eaten up by them, locust leaf miner might be the culprit. This insect gets its name because 1, it really likes black locust, and 2, because its larvae are leaf miners. They actually feed inside the leaves in the juicy green part, leaving behind the harder exterior parts of those leaves. Locust leaf miner is a type of beetle in a group that people typically refer to as leaf beetles. It's pretty small and flat. It has a black head and orange wing covers, and those wing covers have a black band down the center as well as ridges on the top. They can go through a couple generations each year. The adult beetles overwinter in the leaf litter or crevices in the bark, and when they emerge in the spring at the same time as those leaves emerge, they'll feed on those leaves as well as lay their eggs. Those eggs hatch into larvae that will feed inside of those leaves, tunneling through them. Locust leaf miners really prefer black locust, and that's where you're going to see them the most. Now, they can occasionally feed on some other trees as well. It's not as common. Black locust typically is not considered a high value tree. It tends to be kind of weedy and a rapid colonizer, a pretty aggressive tree, and you'll find it in a lot of fence roads, roadsides, edges, and other disturbed habitat. In some parts of the world where it's non-native, it can be a nuisance and is even considered invasive. But where we are, it's a native species. And while it might not be a premier timber species or something that people seek out, it's still an important species in these natural areas and very apparent along the highways, which is why it sticks out so much when locust leaf miner is doing its damage. Nonetheless, this is not actually a major health concern for the tree. The damage that locust leaf miner causes can vary year to year. Some years you're going to have bigger outbreaks of it, but it's a native insect and the tree has lived with this for a long time. Typically those trees, they're really resilient and they can recover just fine. In addition, different years you're going to have different amounts of damage caused by the locust leaf miner, and it's unlikely that the same tree is going to be really hit again and again by it. While there are some insecticides that could be used to protect trees from damage by the locust leaf miner, this typically isn't necessary, and those trees will be fine just on their own. One question that you might have as you're seeing these trees with brown canopies is this locust leaf miner something I don't really need to worry about, or is this something more severe? If you've got questions on that, I encourage you to reach out to your county agent or a knowledgeable arborist. There are some more severe things that can cause similar damage, but if it's happening in the middle of the summer and it's on a black locust, I think locust leaf miner is a pretty good bet. If you're wondering what black locust looks like, you can look online for different ID characteristics, but look for those long compound leaves, their beautiful fragrant flowers in the spring, and since they're in the bean family, their seeds are actually in these bean-like seed pods. Thanks for joining us today and learning a little bit more about locust leaf miner. Reach out to us if you have any questions and make sure to follow us online.
Well, thanks for that presentation, Ellen. We greatly appreciate that. And at first when you showed the first picture when it was like further away, I thought that looks like a lightning bug.
Right, it does. I think it looks a little bit like a lightning bug. And you could see in those leaves that I was showing, they're just covered with them. So there are, they're pretty apparent. And next time you're driving down the highway, look on the sides and you're going to see trees with brown leaves. And maybe some of that is that it's end of summer. Even our oak trees, this point in the summer are going to start to look a little brown and ratty. There's lots of different insects and diseases that can cause some of that. And a lot of that's totally normal. It might not look great and it might cause some concern. And I have received calls about this and other kind of similar issues. Why does my tree look bad? What's wrong with the leaves? And a lot of times I can just be like, oh, it's late summer and things are looking kind of bad, but your tree will be fine. And that's really different from something where, your whole tree has actually died suddenly. And that's really concerning. And if you were to be driving along the highway and see, a whole bunch of dead trees, that's something I want to get a call about. I bet our Kentucky Division of Forestry wants to get a call about, because if we can catch something early and maybe stop it from spreading, that's really great. Versus this, that it's great to be concerned about. And, I'd rather people call and check on it, even if it turns out to be locust leaf miner, and your trees will be just fine.
That's good. At least they're not doomed, right?
Not at all. Although some people might wish they would be. I know it's not the most popular tree. In addition to kind of being a little weedy, it has thorns on it, which, are not fun if you get into.
Surprise!
But in our area, this is, a native species that's what it does, and it's important. Now, of course, other people in other parts of the country and world might laugh because there it's considered invasive. So you're welcome, world. One of our natives becoming your invasives. I know a lot of times we do. Sorry about that, everyone else. I'm sure you're watching this and thinking, great, locust leaf miner, you kill those black locusts. But no, it's not going to be that kind of thing. This is very minor damage.
Still, we appreciate you letting us know, Ellen. It's good to keep up with what's going on out there in our woods and with our trees. And you do such a great job, you and your whole team. So thank you so much. Really.
Thanks for having me on today.
Thanks, Ellen.
Yay.
Well, wonderful show. I think we learned a lot about how to ID birds. That's for sure.
Yeah, and we got some little quiz time in with Kai, and we learned about an insect that, thankfully, is not going to wipe out some of our species.
Not going to destroy every tree in the world, right?
That's no doubt. Yeah, good show. Thanks to our guests. And as we wrap up today, thank you all for being with us. I had a chance, Renee, earlier this week to go down to Letcher County and visit with some of those folks and try to help out a little bit. But there's still lots of need, folks, out there in Eastern Kentucky, and I'm sure Western Kentucky as well. So let's not forget about our friends and families that have been impacted by some of this severe weather. I think they're probably good on many of the supplies, at least what I'm hearing in Eastern Kentucky, but they could use actual physical labor. So if you do have the capacity, they could certainly use some assistance out there. So just keep those in mind. But thank you all for being with us this week, as always.
Definitely. And we greatly appreciate you joining us. And if you all have any questions whatsoever, you can come to fromthewoodstoday.com and we can definitely let you know about that. Show you all kind of any video we've ever had for, 117 shows.
A lot. Yeah.
There's a lot on there. So we greatly appreciate it. And we appreciate you all joining us. And until then, see you next week. Take care. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
From the woods today.